Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to this session. Thanks for the introduction. I'm privileged to be here, particularly because over the past 20 years, I've had the privilege to working in about 17 sub-Saharan African countries now, and the number is growing, which is great because it gives me the opportunity to have a broader picture of what I'm really passionate about. I'm from Italy originally, but some people say that I was adopted by several African destinations in the last few years. This session today develops particularly well from what was discussed earlier today in terms of heritage and sharing heritage, and connects the issue of transregional tourism very well in terms of how can we make sure that multi-destination economies can develop over time and space. This session today on transregional tourism, community engagement in conservation and tourism economies, is extremely well placed to address three main issues. Facilitation of tourism across the international borders, so in current climate of international cooperation, I think is fundamental. We talk about cooperation across borders. Number two is the implementation of programs to enhance the sustainable use of nature and cultural heritage resources to improve the livelihood of resident communities. Somebody at the end of the last session actually asked the question about what about the communities, and this is one of the questions we're going to try to answer today. And then thirdly, facilitation of a healthy and competitive economic environment, which is the reason why today we've got three panelists extremely well placed to share their experience from an international perspective and also from a particularly national perspective from Zambia and Namibia. On our panel today, we have three exponents of the tourism community. The first one is Elsia Grandcourt from the UNWTO. Elsia is currently Program Director of the Regional Program for Africa at UNWTO. And she joined UNWTO in 2013 and is keen to fully operate two backgrounds of private and public sector development to benefit the strategy for tourism and development in Africa. Please, Elsia, come and join us. The second speaker of today is Professor Dr. Andrew Nambota, who is Director of the Transfrontier Conservation Area at the Ministry of Tourism and Arts in Lusaka, Zambia. Professor Nambota is currently director of the TFCA, as I said, but most importantly, before joining the Ministry of Tourism and Arts, he served as head of department in disease control and eventually as dean of the School of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Zambia. So he's a colleague, academic colleague, but most importantly, his experience goes across a number of fields, and of course, conservation and the importance of natural resource management is at his heart as much as the heart of those that are sitting in this room today. Please, Professor Nambota, please join us. And then we've got Josephine Nambo Lipinja. Josephine is, again, Transfrontier Conservation Area Coordinator for the Ministry of Environment and Tourism of Namibia. Josephine also coordinated for many years, for over 8 years, the Community Conservancy Program of Namibia, therefore having extensive experience in the issue of community engagement. And I believe that one of the interesting aspects of having Josephine on board today as well is the fact that she brings to these four the particular applied experience of working for so long with communities in rural and remote areas, such as one based in Namibia. Please, Josephine, come and join us. So the way we're going to actually run this today is I'm going to ask a couple of questions each, and then I'm going to open the floor for a few questions. So I'm going to start actually with Elsia. Elsia, obviously you work from one of the most challenging and I would say demanding positions at the moment, with the fact that Africa is at the core attention of many actions to do with tourism. And obviously with you being the regional director for Africa within UNWTO, one of the questions that is pertinent to this particular gathering today is, how do you see UNWTO and what is WTO doing in terms of trans-region tourism and obviously community development?
Thank you, Marina, and good afternoon to everybody. I'd like to acknowledge also the Honorable Minister from Zambia, who is here with us today, and congratulations to Zambia for supporting this forum. As you rightly mentioned, the United Nations World Tourism Organization is the specialized agency in the field of tourism. And at the core center of our mandate is to promote responsible, sustainable, but also universally accessible tourism. And trans-border tourism is very critical for us also, and it's at the core of our mandate, because we've been collaborating with several regional bodies on the continent, especially also in aligning the work that we do with the African Union and the Agenda 2063 in promoting sustainable tourism. And a lot of the work that we do in this regard impacts a lot on communities, and obviously leading towards poverty alleviation, going into the creation of jobs, and being able to support member states with the proper and right policy framework in order to be able to drive the agenda of promoting sustainable tourism. And of course, through the various activities that we've carried out in the continent, it has touched various countries in terms of, as I mentioned, setting up the right policy framework, in order to be able to do joint promotional marketing as well for the different products that complement each other. So fostering the cooperation between countries is very important and key in such situations. And so going beyond just what we are doing in the Africa region, of course, we have several also models around the world, whereby we see very good examples also of trans-border tourism, such as in Europe in the Danube region. But I'm sure now our colleagues will give us more the details of the perspectives when it comes to our region, especially the work that is being done between Zambia, Botswana, and Namibia.
Well, in fact, one of the focus of today is looking at the KAZA region, which is effectively the Kavango-Zambezi Transfrontier conservation areas, which has been one of the, probably in terms of the Africa region, is probably one of the most avant-garde in terms of how do you put together so many different countries, and in particular, in this particular region, we've got Angola, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia and Zimbabwe, is how do you make sure that so many different cultural environmental settings and natural resources comes together under the leadership of different, obviously, government in a very changing world in which we are, and how do you make sure that the cooperation, as you said, there were 3 words that I made a note while you were talking: cooperation, product development, and successful models. This is what probably we need to focus on. And one of the things I would like to do is to ask my next question to Professor Nambota about the importance of transfrontier conservation for these type of mission, which is about conservation, and conservation not only of natural heritage, but conservation in its broader meanings. And what has done in your, how has been beneficial to your country in particular, just to share the experience.
Good afternoon, audience. I want to recognize the presence of my minister, who has ably given us a wonderful speech, which was quite cross-cutting. Thank you so much, Minister. Having said that, I want to focus on transfrontier conservation areas, KAZA in particular. Transfrontier conservation areas bring a unique phenomenon to conservation in that it is man-centered. We believe that conservation in the classic word, in its classic meaning, does not really cover much, but that conservation with a human face, conservation without man, will certainly not make any difference. So what we are trying to say in transfrontier conservation areas is that whatever development, whatever conservation initiatives we have, they have to have a human face. If you do not put man at the center of your strategy, then you've lost it, because man conserves because of benefits that he derives from that. So conservation without man is no conservation at all. It's like my minister was saying, a nation without culture is a dead culture. Again, conservation without man is no conservation at all. So in transfrontier conservation areas, we want to put man at the center of our strategy. So what benefits does this bring to us? There are several benefits. One of them is that of regional integration. We have 5 countries in KAZA, Kavango-Zambezi transfrontier conservation areas. As the moderators rightly put it, Zambia, Namibia, Botswana, Angola, and Zimbabwe. 5 countries. We have so many shared resources that are common to all the 5 countries, including water bodies. So how do we manage these resources together, jointly, if not by talking to each other? So now we have come up with these 3 FCAs to manage these resources jointly. At the moment, we have joint law enforcement committees, for example. In other words, committees that transgress boundaries in law enforcement, anti-poaching committees. That is something that was not heard of in the past. We have joint fisheries committees between Namibia, Botswana, and Zambia. Initially, we used to have fish ban in Zambia. We would institute a fish ban from December to March. Meanwhile, the water body, the Zambezi River, is common to both Zambia, Namibia, to Zambia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. Zambia would institute this fish ban. Namibia would continue fishing. The fish in that water, in the rivers, did not know that it has crossed the border. That is why we came up with these joint fisheries bodies. Again, the elephants. The elephants do not know our political boundaries. Even if you tell it, today you are in Zambia, tomorrow you are in Zimbabwe, no, it will not listen to you. The boundaries were put up without looking at all these aspects. The people, I have cousins, I come from the border with Sesheke, with Namibia. in a small town called Sesheke. I have my cousins across in Namibia. I have my uncles in Namibia. But all that was just overnight. The Potsdam Agreement, I don't know if we still remember our history. Overnight, someone in Berlin or in Potsdam just put a boundary, said, now you belong to Namibia or Caprivi, Northwest Africa, you belong to Rhodesia and so on. So there was no looking at the cultural or ethnic groupings that remained. So families were cut apart, just like the East and West Berlin those days, or East and West German those days. So it's exactly the same principle. And today, we have transboundary natural resources forums. We have our chiefs, our communities meeting with each other on a regular basis. So really, the advantage has been so much. Our people have benefited. Realizing that the tourism development does not take a day to develop, or the wildlife resource does not take a day to develop. We have come up with alternative livelihood programs for our communities so that we carry our communities on board. And our communities are now benefiting. We have lit up their schools. Some of the schools in the area, KAZA is vast. We have come up with programs such as conservation agriculture, so that as we preach conservation to them, they are food stable. They are food secure, so that they listen to our message of conservation. But what we ensure is that at the back of their minds, there is that link that this intervention is because of that animal that we have not poached. This intervention is because of that lodge there. We are preaching to our lodges, to lodge owners, that our people are trainable. Train them how to produce vegetables, for example, that can be consumed or sold to your lodges. Teach them how to produce high quality stuff. And they are doing that. So we are involving them in the development of our tourism sector. We are involving them in the development of our conservation initiative. So basically, this is what I'll say initially.
So what I take from there, I mean, amongst the very important, many things you have highlighted, I think three very important things that maybe we want to pick up later as the fact that there is obviously the enforcement of a number of regulations that has come from a joint effort, Absolutely. Which I think is quite fundamental to make these initiatives work. The second one I took away is the importance of in facilitating a change in the behavior of people, which may just simply work by traditional way of living, and therefore having an alternative is not necessarily at their hands in the first instance. But then when that change of behavior comes, maybe tourism and conservation can bring that change, which translates into economic development in a way, socioeconomic development. So this is, I would say, are the core things that I took from your answer. Now, may I ask the same question to you, Josephine? Because I think obviously Namibia is, of course, you know, in terms of community-based development has been very much at the forefront in sub-Saharan Africa. I remember one of my first visits to Africa was actually in Namibia in 2004. And Nakopta and the conservancy system was one of the most advanced ones. So could you give us some examples of benefit of KAZA in countries like Namibia, please?
Good afternoon, Honorable Minister, and thank you for meeting you here in the audience, and thanks to the question. First of all, I would like to build on to what yes. Professor Nambota have said here, and I want to speak to the issue of enhancement of law enforcement, particularly on issue of wildlife crimes. For Namibia, for example, the wildlife elephant poaching was quite high in a day. And this is because it was so difficult a poacher can poach in Babata National Park For example, just across Babwata, there is Siomangwezi National Park in Zambia, and on the other side, there is Luyenge National Park in Angola. And before that, there was no collaboration in terms of law enforcement. And the poaching was so high because the poacher just crossed over and then disappear in the thin air. But now, because of all this joint collaboration, and I think what really is significant in this is also the involvement of communities in this key aspect of wildlife crime. Community have been really good in terms of providing intelligence. And we have the Conservancy program in Namibia, for example, where we have community game guards. And they have been quite good in terms of providing intelligence. And also through what was referred to here as Community Transboundary Forum in other countries as well. You have all this. And because of this network, we have seen a significant reduction in wildlife crime, particularly on elephant. And I think that I want to highlight because it has been one of the challenges for Namibia as a country, but of course for KAZA.
Across the region.
Across the region, yes. The other benefit which I think I should really highlight is the contribution to the implementation of our human-wildlife conflict. It's a known fact that the conflict between human and wildlife in terms of crop damages, livestock losses, even human lives in the KAZA component is quite an issue. And we have seen through the initiative of KAZA, the support. Namibia has the national policy on human-wildlife conflict, and we are implementing that. And there have been a significant contribution in terms of putting mitigation measures to mitigate community conflicts. These are, for example, croc-proof fence, where local community can go and fetch water in a safer enclosure. And there have been a lot of funding from different cooperative partners, including KfW, the German government, to assist us in this mitigation measure. And what is important is that these are some of the lessons which, as partner countries, are also upscaling within or across the border. The other critical benefit to Namibia, but across the border, is the issue of wildlife movement. Mm-hmm. And there is an element of community engagement, again, in terms of, I have examples where in Namibia, some of the community voluntarily moved out of the wildlife corridor. And this is to allow the free movement of wildlife, opening up those corridors where, and as a result, it's also reducing the human-wildlife conflict. And issues of, for instance, we had a lot of landmines in Angola. And as a result of KAZA, there have been a lot of demining in the Angolan component of KAZA, and that also have enhanced the wildlife movement. But again, the aspect of community and ensure that they also collaborate, because now the communities in Namibia have also formed forums with the Angolan community in Jamba. This is really to tap and learn from what we have been doing in terms of community-based natural resources management. I think those are the key issues I really want to highlight.
And I must emphasize that this is actually, thank you to the Minister of Zambia for organizing this forum, because these stories are not stories that we often hear when we talk about Africa. There is always some element of discontent, and we talk about poaching, we talk about wildlife crimes, we talk about a lot of things, especially in the European media, but actually we never really hear the success stories. And I think it's about time we start learning about those success stories, so that we are also exposed of what are the measures that need to be put in place to make sure that conservation takes a first role in the most effective way, really, because it's not conservation at all costs, because very often what we talk about in our European forum is no matter what, we need to conserve and preserve wildlife, but we need to understand there are different dynamics. Now, very briefly, I would like to have the three of you giving me an idea of what your organization will be doing to promote and develop further trans-regional cooperation for conservation and community development. Elsie, I would like to ask from a UNWTO perspective, how do you see UNWTO playing a role in this?
As I mentioned earlier, we are definitely working very closely with our members in pushing forward this agenda, and sustainable development remains at the core of our work at UNWTO, but also going a bit beyond that. It's important also to be able to measure the impact of the development. We have produced a methodology on tourism satellite accounting, whereby we can measure the impact, the economic impact of tourism development. And now we are working towards measuring the impact that sustainable development has on the environment as well, which is very important. And 2 years ago, we also put together a research. We did a research to evaluate the impact and value of the economic value of wildlife watching in Africa. And as the colleague mentioned, because poaching is a big issue that we've had to deal with in the region, but it's important also to be able to show how preserving and conserving the environment, as Professor mentioned, the animals, the gorillas, what value, economic value it brings to the economies of countries and as well as to the communities. So we will continue to work with the different international organizations and bodies that are there in order to be able to help our members to be able to advance in promoting sustainable tourism development in their respective countries.
Thank you very much, Elsie. Professor Nambota, from a Zambian perspective, would you please share with us how your ministry intends to involve communities in such process? And if you had to highlight one particular challenge you've got, what is that?
Thank you so much, moderator. Government realizes, as you heard from my minister's speech, that communities, if not involved from the onset as you plan tourism development, then you've lost it. They must be involved in all the stages. Communities are tired of being end recipients, just receiving. And this is why most initiatives fail. So having realized that, my government supports the formation of community resource boards. And going forward, community resource boards will be supported. We have structures in KAZA. For example, we have the National Steering Committee in KAZA. And that National Steering Committee actually is a body, is a committee that is composed of, among other people, communities. So the communities are actually involved from A to Z, grassroots. They are involved, and that is very, very important. Also, government supports private-public partnerships. It is a policy. What does that mean? At community level, what government is encouraging is that the communities come up with land, for example. In some cases, they are supported with putting up a lodge. And then they say, let's get a partner that will run this in a professional manner for you, and then the proceeds are shared. That is a policy in support of our communities.
So basically using some form of joint ventures between investors and local community members or organizations.
Absolutely. So, and that is what is
and give me one challenge you are encountering.
The challenges are many.
Give me only one. We've got time for one.
KAZA is vast, is big. You start with one. You can only start from one point.
Of course.
And therefore, it is very difficult to spread the resources to the entire KAZA across. So that is a big challenge. The other challenge is management of expectations. After you've engaged the communities, so there is this mammoth animal called KAZA. And then you stay 10 years, 5 years, you don't touch them. They say, what were you talking about? Yeah, so the management of expectations is very high. I had left out a very important issue.
Oh, okay, go on.
And that's the development of the UNIVISA.
Right.
KAZA
okay.
UNIVISA, very cardinal, very, very cardinal, as a project that is for now, between Zambia and Zimbabwe. You may wish to know that from next month, March, end of next month, 31st March, you will be able to apply for the KAZA UNIVISA online. What does that mean? Once you have applied and you get the KAZA UNIVISA, you pay $50. And that $50 will allow you to stay in Zambia for 1 month. And you can crisscross, go to Zimbabwe and back at will for that 1 month. It's a multiple entry visa. In addition to that, you have a 24 hours in Chove National Park of Botswana.
Okay.
My colleague here will tell you about the next step that Namibia is going to take within this month that will make.
So I would say, let's say, to take forward that collaboration also in terms of implementation of legislation such as visa would be also another important step. Okay,
absolutely.
that's fine. Yeah. Namibia, give me a couple of points about the success stories and what your country is trying to do to implement innovative ways to have more initiative in this field of trans-regional cooperation and conservation.
Thank you, Professor, for the question. We have been at KAZA level, but also at the country's level, there have been a lot of planning. KAZA have the Master Integrated Development Plan, which is already approved, and we, at partner countries level, at the country level, we have the National Integrated Plan for the country. We have done much in terms of planning. And I think it's really the time to walk the talk. And for Namibia, we have quite a number of plans in terms of community development, but also drawing from the wildlife dispersal area plan, which is inclusive across the border. We have quite also enough activities for communities. And one of the areas which we really want to enhance, because we have started already with the issue of concessions, community concessions in national park. These are tourism concessions, but also wildlife utilization concessions in national park. And I want for this session to concentrate on the tourism concession. Namibia have the national concession policy, whereby a number of the community-based organizations, the conservancies, are given concessions in the park. And there is really a need to operationalize all these concessions. However, one of the challenges which we have there, we well understand the issue of joint venture, which is quite critical, but you also have, I think there is an opportunity for conservancies to also fully own some tourism lodges. And the challenge have been funding, resources, in terms of finance and capital. And we are really going to embark in a process to make sure that we seek investment for community lodges as well. Of course, I think it's high time that community always go into a partnership without capital, startup capital funding. And there is a need, if we really want to ensure that benefit, real benefit, tangible benefits goes to community, there is a need for these communities to own a number of lodges. The second issue is we have the Namibia development, tourism development plan. And again, there is quite a lot of activities there. And there is also a lot of mitigation measures in terms of human-wildlife conflict, which we really want to implement, because as a result of KAZA, of course, there are so many benefits that we can have all our tourists move between countries and all that. But the issue of human-wildlife conflict is increasing, because free movement, I mean, animals are also increasing. So there is again a need to implement those mitigation measures, but also to see how we can offset the losses. The losses are quite high. Communities are experiencing, we have poverty in KAZA, and if the last field of maize for that community, that's the livelihood of that community. If it's destroyed completely by the elephants, and we want to glorify elephants, they are so precious, but I think we need to look at ways on how we mitigate these losses, but also we need to assist the community. I think that's very, very critical. The whole issue of also then implementing the wildlife dispersal areas activities in terms of sharing lessons between communities, but also I think assisting other countries to realize that community-based natural resources, community-based tourism, it's a way to go if we really need. It's as Professor, as Honorable Minister have said, without benefit to communities, the sustainability of TFCA is at stake. And it's very important that we recognize that, but we also invest so that TFCA become very meaningful to a local community who suffers losses of human-wildlife conflict, from both as countries, but also those who come to our KAZA. KAZA is for not only for those member states, it's for the world. We are taking care of the resources for all of us. So how do we all then contribute to make sure that people who really suffer the losses get benefits?
I think that is actually an exceptional conclusion to our debate. I would love to continue, but unfortunately we are very much almost at the end of our time available, and I would like to have maybe 2 questions from the floor. I would like to thank the panelists, and I would like you to join me in an applause to them for their great opportunity to share information with us. So if anybody had some really important question that you cannot wait to ask. Does anybody would like to ask any questions? We've got a gentleman in the back there. Is there a microphone is coming? It's just a gentleman. There are two gentlemen who put their hands up.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Joshua. I'm from Kenya. Fantastic talk there from all the panelists. And my question is, Professor, you mentioned about the involvement of the community, the success of conservation, its need community. The lady there, Josephine, she talked about the need of the funding. My question is, in Africa, particularly East Africa and Southern Africa, we have fantastic projects about conservation and tourism. But the unfortunate thing is that communities are always shortchanged, because you mentioned we don't have funds. And where we got the funds, we got the investors who come to invest in these conservation areas. But by the end of it, the community end up losing their heritage in terms of they cannot see any benefits. I want to cite Kenya as a for example. We have fantastic opportunities there that are happening. Good benefits going to the community. But in some areas, community get peanuts. What is the role of the government? Of course, I don't have any experience from Namibia and Zambia and every south of Africa, but what is the role of the government to ensure that the communities are not manipulated by that factor? Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much for that question. That is basically the role of government. Government has to help in the negotiations, in the contract formulation. There is no way that we are going to allow in KAZA, for example, that an individual enters a direct contract with the communities without the involvement of the guidelines. Us as government, we have drawn guidelines. We have what we call in KAZA a stakeholder engagement strategy. That stakeholder engagement strategy outlines which stakeholder and what are the benefits to both the government, to the communities, and also to the stakeholder himself. So really we have come up with systems that we think are watertight. We know mankind, we know how they behave, but I think we've come up with a system. We have something in place that guides all contracts that are entered into in KAZA. Thank you.
Who was somebody else in the back? Gentleman with the beard in the back? No? No? Not anymore. Somebody else? Right, I'm going to just add something to this particular point since we are discussing. And I think that in my experience in particular working across different destinations in sub-Saharan Africa, what I've observed over the past 10, 15 years is that there has been a change in attitude in the way certain resources are managed. And I think institutions like UNWTO, the World Bank, and other international organizations are also looking to support governments and institutions to actually develop that capacity to manage. One other point that you actually highlighted earlier is the importance of managing the resources from the monetarization of wildlife. So how do you actually account to the value of that impact so that you can justify conservation, versus to the point of actually having all the procurement of collaboration, public-private collaboration. So I suppose one of the things that we need to monitor now is the change that is happening. Of course, each country in sub-Saharan Africa have different experiences, but maybe the cooperation that we mentioned at the beginning is fundamental in sharing the best practice that are taking place, so that actually we can learn from the lessons of the past and potentially just move forward in the most effective way. And I think this is the lesson that we need to take away from actually today. We're sitting here talking about these things. I cannot remember ITB actually having a forum like this so much focused on conservation, bringing people that can bring those stories. And I think ITB needs to, and the Zambia government needs to be praised for actually having done that as a way forward to a progressive collaboration for conservation and community development in Africa. Thank you very much all, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you, dear panel guests. Thank you very much. But please stay on the podium for a moment, please, because the final statement is for the Honourable Minister Banda. Yes. Please come to us one more again. And I've got one last question. You have said if you haven't seen Zambia, you haven't seen Africa. What do you mean with that? Or the microphone again.
Thank you very much. First of all, allow me to say a very big thanks to the panelists here, and including the other panel that sat. But apart from that, we want to thank the UNWTO for sending us a representative to be here, UNESCO, and also yourselves, a very wonderful audience. Indeed, that is a very appropriate question which you have asked. If you haven't visited Zambia, then you haven't seen anything. The truth is, there is everything in Zambia. When you have seen it in Zambia, you don't need to go anywhere else at all. Because you carry the whole story from Zambia. And what you have heard from here would want to urge you to take it with you wherever you are going, whichever country you are representing. Go and tell them you heard it, you heard about Zambia, and it is in Zambia where it is happening. And it is in Zambia where everything is. You can talk about the 5 big ones. Elsewhere you have been to Zambia. Yes. You know what I'm talking about as a representative of UNWTO. Indeed. Everything is there. Whatever, sorry, I'm not saying that you don't have anything. But the truth is, if you talk about walking safari, for instance, it all started from Zambia. It all started from Zambia, and it is still in Zambia. So we are only urging you that next time you are traveling, ensure that you have got Zambia on your itinerary, and you are not going to regret coming to Zambia. Once again, thank you very much for your participation. We are very grateful. We are very happy to be at ITB, and we're only hoping that you are taking Zambia with you back home. Thank you very much.
Okay, and with the loudness of your applause, please show us how you like the speech and the panel guests. Thank you very much.